What is going on, friends? This is Matt Carter, that YouTube realtor, and today I'm going to be going over some of the pros and cons of living in London, Ontario. I released in the last month or so a video on moving to London, so if you haven't taken a look at that video yet, I will link it up above, somewhere above my head here. You can go click on that, watch it, and see some other details. I would talk about the city, but in this video, I'm going to specifically go over some of the pros and cons of living in the city. I didn't grow up in London. I moved here from the GTA, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Definitely a different pace of life around here. You know, it's not as hectic, it's not as crazy traffic-wise, and just the population in general, which is great. So I'm going to go over some of the pros and cons that I've found living here over the last few years. Right before I jump in, if you don't mind, just take a few seconds and hit that like button and subscribe to my content. I really appreciate it. It helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. So now we'll get right into it. So I'm going to start off with the cons in the list, and the first one I'm going to talk about is the property taxes. So this kind of hits close to home. I am a realtor in the city. I work with a lot of people looking to buy and sell in the area. So this is one of the major considerations you're going to have to take if you are looking to purchase a home in the city. Currently, the tax rate is around 1.39% or so, and if you compare that to the rest of Ontario, you're going to see we're about 8th on the list from the highest property taxes amongst all the other cities within Ontario. So running those numbers roughly, if you're purchasing a house or you live in a house that is currently assessed at a value of around $500,000, you're going to be paying just under $7,000 a year on property taxes. Now, I won't go into the nitty gritty, and just because your home, you purchased it for $500,000 doesn't mean it's necessarily assessed that much, so you're probably going to be under that, so don't worry too much. If you are looking for more info on that certain topic, make sure you check out a number of my other videos on my channel. So number 2 on my list of cons of living in the city, and it's probably one of my biggest pet peeves of living here, is the number of train tracks and the train crossings within the city. So I'll get into this in a little bit in the city planning, but I really don't think they anticipated that the city was going to grow to the size it is right now. And the amount of train crossings that you get within the city is just absolutely astonishing. I think there's somewhere north of 65 train crossings that go through the city. And this is across major arteries that people take to and from work every morning and evening. So I know in some cases there is a train crossing right at Adelaide Street. They're currently doing an underpass to bypass this issue, but sometimes in the past you could be waiting, 15, 20, sometimes upwards of 30 minutes at this train crossing because it is right next to where all the trains dock, and they shunt all the trains to go onto different routes. So sometimes the trains are just sitting still, blocking that roadway for sometimes upwards of 30 minutes. So it's great that they're addressing this, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money in the future to fix all of the issues running through the city. Next up, and number 3 on my list of cons for the city, and this applies mainly if you are outside of Ontario, outside of Canada even, and you're traveling, and somebody asks you where you're from, you're going to say you're from London, and everybody's just going to assume you're from London, England. Most people don't even know that there is a London, Ontario, so we just end up saying that we're from Toronto and kind of lumping ourselves into that GTA group. I know we like to avoid getting put into that category as much as possible, but for the sake of argument, it's a lot easier saying we're from Toronto than explaining where we're actually from. Number 4 on my cons list is the city planning, and I touched on this briefly talking about the trains, but it just appears that when they were planning out the original city and expanding the borders, they didn't really anticipate the size of which London was going to be. Currently in London, in London and the surrounding area, we're over 500,000 people now, so there are quite a few people in this area, but we really don't have the the roads and highways and expressways going through the city that is needed to accommodate this amount of people. Our major highways are on the south end of town and the west end of the city, which is even outside of the boundaries. So if you're on the north end of town, it is a long way to get to a highway. Other major arteries such as Highbury, Adelaide Street, Wellington, going right through the city up to Richmond, and then on the west end of town, Wonderland, Hyde Park. They're all super busy arteries going north and south within the city. And that's not even to mention any of the east and west avenues that are just always, that aren't wide enough and are pretty much crammed with traffic during rush hour. The nice thing is, I will say on the flip side, is that it's usually only during these peak hours of the day. Outside of that, it's generally not too bad, although, it can be a little bit of an adventure. If you're going from the southeast end of the city to the northwest, it can take you upwards of half an hour or so. So number 5 on my list, and this is probably the biggest issue that London has, and it's an issue that a lot of cities in Ontario, not only Ontario, but a lot of the part of the world is, we have a pretty big homelessness issue in the city. And there's been a lot of talks in the last little while about having affordable housing projects, and there have been some strides in pushing for more affordable units, but just it doesn't seem like it's enough for the amount of people that we do have living on the streets, unfortunately. So I'm hoping in the next little while this gets addressed a little bit more. We get more funding put towards it. We get more solutions put towards and helping all these people that can't find a roof over their heads. Next up, and the last one on my list for cons, is the infrastructure and just construction going on in the city. So London is a pretty relatively old city for how old a lot of cities are in Ontario. So there is a lot of construction going on. London is going on to being 200 years old, so a lot of infrastructure that has been around in the past, been going and has been updated in the past, is up for being renewed again. So no matter where you go, it doesn't seem to matter. Downtown is a big project right now, changing out the sewer lines and a lot of issues like that. Not only there, but there are other areas and communities within the town, within the city, that are having to undergo these infrastructure renewal programs. So it doesn't seem to matter what time of year. I guess we do get a little bit of break in the winter, but once that frost has lifted, it seems like it's always construction time within the city of London. So moving right on to the pros of living in London, and these are some of the reasons why I moved here and stuck around since. And I guess I'll start with the reason that brought me to London originally is the Postsecondary. So I came here originally to do my master's at University of Western Ontario, and there's also there's also Fanshawe College within the city as well. Both are great post-secondary institutions. We get a ton of students coming here every single year. I think it's upwards of 60,000 students during the school year, increase the population around here. So it's definitely is around a university town, but it's for a reason. It's because we have these great programs at Western. We have Ivy School of Business, Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, as well as a bunch of great programs at Fanshawe as well. My number 2 pro for living in London is your proximity to everything else around us. If you look at the map, we are smack dab in the middle of a ton of great places. We have to the east, we have 2 hours to Toronto. To the west, we have 2 hours to both Windsor and over the border to Detroit. To kind of the southeast, we have 2 hours-ish to get to Niagara Falls, and if you want to go to Buffalo. And if you want to stay a little more local, 45 minutes either north or south, you get to both of the lakes. So you either have Grand Bend up north, or you have Port Stanley, a great little town to the south. So no matter what you want to do, you're never too far from getting all those amenities that maybe we don't have in the city, such as lakes and water, stuff like that. But you're always super close that you can make a day trip out of it. Number 3 on my list, and this is kind of my industry that I deal with, and it's the increased affordability that you get within the city of London. And I say this in comparison to a bunch of the larger cities within Ontario as well. So looking at the GTA, and then out to Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph, Hamilton. You look at the city of London, and we're sitting at about an average price of just over $800,000. We're in the second half of April 2022. So if you compare that to what we're looking at in the GTA, you're looking at an upwards of over $1 million for the average price home in those areas. So your money definitely does go a lot further. And there's a lot of construction happening around here, so there's always going to be more housing coming up. As well, with the affordability, cost of living is a little bit cheaper here than if you were living downtown Toronto as well. Next up on the list, and probably one of my favorite things about living here, there is actually a lot of stuff to do, and a lot of people seem to think that there's not a lot to do in London, but we have tons of events and festivals. We have a couple different parks within the city and downtown. You know, we get Rock the Park, a big music festival. We get Sunfest, Ribfest, a bunch of other festivals that go on at Victoria Park downtown. We also have a ton of different venues around the city and local attractions that are great for tourism as well. So we have Bud Gardens, which is right downtown. The London Knights, great OHL team, play there. The London Lightning, get a bunch of concerts, musicals, a whole bunch of stuff happening at that venue. Aside from that, if you get outside of the downtown region, we have 100 Kellogg Place, which is the old Kellogg factory where they used to make cereal. They've converted that into a huge play area. In the main area there, they have a whole bunch of trampoline park, high ropes courses. There's a clubhouse upstairs that has golf simulators and a pub. There's a virtual reality arcade. There's just a whole bunch of stuff, as well as a brewery and a distillery on site as well. We also have Bowler Mountain, which is a great ski hill and mountain biking path during the summer. So it's great if you just want to get out there, hit the slopes. You don't want to go too far to any major hills. It's not a huge Mount Tremblant or anything like that, like Whistler or anything, but it is good enough for those avid snowboarders and skiers if you just want to get your fix. So no matter what you're looking to do within the city, there's always something you can find going on the weekend or during the week if you just want to get out for an evening. Next up, and second to last, I'm going to say we have the airport. It's great that we have a local airport here in the city, although we are close to a whole bunch of other major airports like Toronto, across the border to Detroit, or even Buffalo. We do have an airport within the city of London on the east end of town, and the services are expanding every single year. It's becoming increasingly busy because people are starting to use it more as a hub, and our flights are going pretty much to most places across Canada right now. So if you're looking for the convenience of an airport, London's got it. So, and the last thing I'll say is the parks and the trails within the city. London is called the Forest City, and it's not because we have a lot of trees. It's a common misconception. It was actually named originally because you had to go through a forest to get to the city. But nonetheless, one of the great attractions of the city of London itself is all the parks and the trails that we have going through the city. One of the biggest trails that we have going through is the Thames Valley Parkway. It is 43 kilometers of trail that mostly follows the Thames River through the city, but that also connects to over 150 kilometers of other trails throughout the city. So you can pretty much get to wherever you want within the city by following these trails. It runs straight down the middle of the city and spreads out from there. So always a good option if you're an avid biker or just looking to get out and enjoy some scenery. So that about does it for my list of pros and cons for the City of London. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear what your favorite parts of the city are, if you've been here for a while, or even if you're considering making a move to the city as well and want to know some more information about other aspects of it. So if you found any value in this content, make sure you take a quick second to like this video, subscribe to my content in my channel, and pass this along to anybody you think would value from it as well. So stay tuned for all my videos coming up in the future. I come out with one every single week. And until then, take care.